For those that don't know, the World Trade Center, the West Side Highway runs one side, Liberty Street on the other side, Church Street, and then Vesey Street. We were looking at Vesey Street, and we get off the bus about a block away. And I got to tell you, I never thought I'd see what I saw that day, which was war. War had come to American soil. There was debris everywhere. From where we were to Vesey Street was nothing but destruction. And I remember just looking up and seeing this big black gaping hole. And then I looked at Tower 2, and I saw the corner of it on fire. Now, in my mind, I felt like, okay, the first plane hit. At this point, I only think it's one plane. The plane hit, blew up, and something deflected and caught the corner of 2 on fire. What we didn't know was when we were en route from Midtown Manhattan to downtown, the second plane hit. So we couldn't see the big gaping hole on 2 on the other side. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, one tower's hit. The other ones took a debris. But now what do we do?
Hey, everybody. Murph here. Welcome back to the next episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. I can't thank you folks enough for coming back every week. I'm bringing some studs and studettes on here. Today's story is unbelievable. It's a first for the Game of Crimes. This show's been going almost 4 years now. Inspirational, a story of perseverance, of sacrifice, of bravery, of fortitude, of the will to survive. I just running through every acronym I can think of in my head here. But you see on the screen here with me, we've got a veteran of the United States Navy who left after he got out of the Navy, joined the New York, New Jersey Port Authority Police Department, and was there during 9/11. You're not going to believe this story. This young man was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, and you folks know I got a direct tie back to Colombia. So if you were from West Virginia, Will, I'd say we're probably related. But since we got that tie to Colombia, let's say the same thing.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me and joining and welcoming Will Jimeno to Game of Crimes. Will, thank you, brother.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you say the same thing when we finish here. And I just got to tell you right up front, Will responded to the towers on 9/11. He was trapped inside the towers for roughly 13 hours and survived it against all odds. I mean, if you don't believe in divine intervention, I don't know how else to explain this, because that's nothing more than a miracle. That's the only way I can explain it. But like we always do every week, we want to start off with a little humor. I contacted Will this morning and said, hey, I got a goofy section in the show called Small Town Police Blotter. Would you play? He answered like in 10 seconds. I'm in, man. I'm in. So Will, tell us about this criminal from New Jersey.
Well, this is an older story, but still a pretty funny one. Beach fashions have evolved over the ages. But in Stafford Township man supposedly went too far in September when he allegedly sported a bikini made out of clear plastic wrap at the beach on Long Beach Island. Steven, and this is a Polish name, I'm going to have trouble pronouncing it, Wojciechowski, homemade creation left his private parts clearly exposed and observers. Really not shocking today, but police reported. And he was charged with lewdness. Thankfully, plastic wrap now comes in assorted colors, so others might consider that option before picking this option, fuchsball. So, I mean, but really today, I mean, if you live in New York City, people walk around naked all the time, so it really shouldn't be this poor guy. So that's all I got to say about that.
Oh, my gosh. That's just not something you want to see when you go to the beach.
Oh, my goodness.
And especially if you got your family with you.
And you're trying to save your retinas.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, it's just something that makes you kind of throw up in the back of your throat a little bit. And so, I'm in Florida, and believe me, I know New York's crazy, but we have no shortage of stupid criminals here in Florida throughout the whole state, not just parts of it. So we got this guy, Kristen Middlestat. And actually, it's not a guy, it's a lady. She's 35 years old. She's from Frostproof, Florida, which is south of Orlando over in Polk County. And I tell you what, the sheriff over there, Grady Judd, he's my favorite sheriff in the state of Florida, maybe in the United States. That guy, he protects his citizens and he brags about it. I love it. If you've never heard of Grady Judd, just Google him. There's even a section called Grady Judd Sayings. It's pretty hilarious. But anyway, Kristen here, she likes to drive cars even when she's not supposed to. She was recently arrested for knowingly driving without a license and fleeing to elude police. Okay, and driving without a license, not so bad, but running from the cops, that's not too good. But you know what? She went in, she paid her bail, and she was released. And what'd she do? Well, on March 6th of this year, she hopped into a silver Ford Mustang and went for a drive. This is all according to Polk County Sheriff's Office. She must have had a bit of lead foot because the sheriff's deputies tried to stop her. Now, Kristen got worried about going back to jail, so she decided she'd do what landed her in hot water in the first place. She put the pedal to the metal and sped off from the cops twice in a reckless dash until the cops managed to stop her vehicle. She's now back in jail for the same crimes that she was arrested for. But here's the kicker of this whole story, Will. And we have well, I'll tell you that in a minute. Kristen was also charged with meth possession. Mm. Here on Game of Crimes, we have our number one rule is kids, don't do meth. Meth always gets you screwed up. So, Kristen, I hope you learned your lesson, but you and I know she didn't. I'm sure we'll read about her again in the future. So, brother, thanks for playing along here. Just quickly, I want to tell everybody how we met. I think we have a mutual friend named Eddie Molina.
Yes.
I've never met Eddie in person, but he has been a longtime supporter of Game of Crimes as well as DEA Narcos, our speaking business. Eddie was last I read, he's a 25-year veteran of military and law enforcement. He's a writer for Law Enforcement Today and the Blue Magazine, plus some other things that he writes for. Mm-hmm. And he'll occasionally reach out to me and say, hey, I think here's a good guest for you. And that's what happened with Will. And honestly, I'd never heard of you. But when I looked you up, I thought, how could I not bring this guy on the show? It's crazy, your story. We're going to get into that in a few minutes. But like we usually start out, just tell us a little bit about where you were born, where you grew up, your family dynamics, brothers, sisters, parents, what they did, that kind of thing, going to school, college, any of that stuff.
Yeah, sure. I was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, 1967. My parents, like every immigrant, dreams about coming to the United States, the land of opportunity. And my dad came over in 68. He's a welder by trade. My mom was a beautician. He came over and settled in Hackensack, New Jersey, 12 miles outside New York City, so you could see New York City. And he worked for a year. Then I think it was 1970. Oh, so, I'm sorry. He came in 69, and then he brought me and my mother in 1970. And we settled in and started our life here in the United States. 4 years later, my mom had my baby sister, Karen. And one of the things I'm proud of is that my mom, especially my mom, she instilled in me the patriotism, which is runs deep in my soul today. She basically said, look, we're going to come from Colombia. We're going to be here in the United States. We're going to learn English. We're going to fly the American flag. And we're going to contribute to this country because we don't want to lose our heritage because we're proud of our heritage, but this is our country. So I'm a big proponent of that. That was instilled by my mother. And she really taught me that, God bless her. Today, she still has a thick accent. She went to college for so many years to better her English. And it's just tough. She's got a really tough accent, but she's shown me that there's nothing you can't do. So she wanted me and my sister to understand that we don't use crutches. We don't care that you're a minority. We don't care what skin color you're. We don't care where you're from or where your financial status is. You work hard, you will overcome, and you will achieve whatever you want. And, my parents taught me that by example. My dad worked hard. He worked 2 jobs. They put a roof over our head, clothes on our back, food on the table. Growing up, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade, which for 2 young immigrants coming from Colombia, that's expensive what they were paying. But they instilled in us faith, hope, and love, those things that helped me through. And I will talk about that later, my survival. But it was great. I grew up in Hackensack. It was a melting pot of people. And then to high school, went off to the Navy, served in the USS Triple PH-10 for 4 years. She's the one that got hit by the mine in 1991 in the first Gulf War. I had just gotten off the ship before that happened. But I got to see 11 different countries, experience the world, and I can't complain. My parents really raised me and my sister, who unfortunately we lost. Unfortunately, fell ill, and we lost her this past February 22nd. But I'm very proud of what my parents instilled in us, what we have become, what we've been able to contribute to this great country. And I'm really proud to be an American.
Excellent, man. I mean, it's motivational just sitting here listening to you talk. There's so many people that come from it, born in this country, that didn't come from another country, that just seem to be haters and don't want to live the American dream. They think they're entitled to handouts from everybody. And
well, that's because unfortunately they live in a bubble. And we'll talk about that later. And there's so many people from around the world that they understand that when I travel the world, people do ask me, like, what's wrong with your generation that you have today? Because they live in places that they don't have the opportunities we have here. So it's one of those things where you live in a bubble and you really don't understand what you have until it's taken from you. And a perfect example is like Brittany Grimes, the basketball player. She ended up, I believe, 3 months in the Russian prison. Now she stands for the flag, and that's okay. She has her opinions. That's what makes a great country, but she understands that this is a special country. Like what's going on with the riots today. I mean, try flying the American flag in Mexico and rioting and see what happens to you.
Absolutely. It's against the law.
So people really have to understand that you live in a special places, and these rights that you have, don't think they're given to us by people who have died, suffered, bled for you to have those rights. And like Ronald Reagan said, freedom is only one generation away. So we always hope that the generation that is currently coming up understands that and continues to protect freedom and our rights.
Right. Absolutely. Your mom and dad, I tell you what, hats off to them for bringing you up the right way, for instilling that appreciation for what you have. That's a model for everybody.
I want to say, I truly believe that there's more people like me here. I think the social media, the media, they will focus on people who make it seem like people don't care about America, but I really believe more people care about America that don't. The riots that are happening today as we speak, it's really a small concentration of people. Most people want to go about their days, go to work, have events on the weekend, have weddings, have birthday parties. They want to live in a peaceful place. What's happening today as we speak in Los Angeles and other parts of the country, those particular people, they're not protesters. They're rioters. They're agitators. They're people causing issues. I mean, a perfect example, and I will debate with anybody who thinks that these are peaceful protests. There's a man killed, as we know, Martin Luther King, never started a riot, never hurt anybody, never destroyed anything, and changed the world. So that's my example to anybody who tells me that what the media is showing us is peaceful protests. You're incorrect. And Martin Luther King would be appalled of what's going on. That's not the way you do things.
Right. We should all be appalled at that.
Yes, and I believe we are. The majority of the country is.
Yep. And if you do a little reading, and one of the things that I promote through a speaking business and here on the podcast is don't believe what other people tell you. We all have a brain. Find out what the topic is, do your own research, and then you decide what you think is right and wrong.
Educate yourself. And it's so true because, and listen, I've been at fault where I've ran with something I saw on social media and then you find out, oh, well, hey, dummy, that's wrong. So I always hold my tongue and try to do my research because there's always time to give your opinion and what opinions like. It's good to educate yourself and be on point when you make a comment and make a smart one. Unfortunately, on both sides, we have politicians that say stupid things, and you realize that they're not held accountable. And I think that's something that in the future it has to be that you make statements or you incite riots or you're held accountable.
And this is off topic just a tad, but when I worked for the government, I wasn't allowed to have a job. I could not make money on the side. I couldn't have an off-duty job. I couldn't have a small business. But you see, members of Congress, they do. They've got speaking businesses, whatever it is. They go in paupers, and within just a few years, they're multimillionaires. Seems to me there's something wrong with that picture.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, but again, me and you, we're dinosaurs. I mean, we grew up in a time where people, a perfect example is this, Pearl Harbor. That's why I love America so much. I was brought up on maybe 5-6 channels we had back then, but they always play the war movies, the police shows. And I always saw the courage in America and how people loved America. And after Pearl Harbor, there wasn't a child in this country that did not grow up, and I'm talking the 70s, the 80s, that were not taught about Pearl Harbor, taught about Korea, taught about Vietnam. Today, and this is scary, and I think people really need to address this, that there's only currently 14 states in the United States that teach about 9/11, that actually have a curriculum. Only 14. So when we talk about history, if we start forgetting the good and the bad, because we're not perfect, right? We're not perfect. But if we forget our history, we're lost. And that's the thing that scares me the most is the educational component of our country. You have people who have agendas instead of just teaching. And I truly believe that what you teach is, this is a great country. This is our history. Yes, we had some bad with slavery and other things. But overall, you look at people today, they're doing well. They're doing better off for those that want to and not use a crutch like my mom would tell me. But for the most part, people have advanced in every race, color, and creed in this United States of America.
I'm with you 100%, brother. It's just two things. One is the reason we study history is to learn from our mistakes so we don't make the same mistakes again. So if we destroy our history, if we ignore our history, we're doomed to repeat what we've done wrong in the past. And then when 9/11 happened, my family had just moved to right outside of Washington, D.C., out next to Dulles Airport in Northern Virginia. Been in there 3 weeks when 9/11 happened. We watched everything on TV. As things calmed down afterwards, we took our daughters, who one's from Bogota, one's from Medellin. We adopted them. We lived in Colombia. Took them down to see the Pentagon because that's history. And
Yes.
we took some pictures and explained to them what happened. They were rather young back then. So fast forward a few years, we get a transfer back to Atlanta, and they're in middle school. And they came in one day and they said, "Hey, we're studying American history, and they're talking about 9/11. Do you think we could take the pictures in?" Because we'd had these nice pictures blown up to 8x10s. We said, "Sure." And my wife contacted the teacher. She said, "We'd love to have that."
Mm-hmm.
She took those pictures in, showed the kids. This is middle school, what we call junior high school. Those kids thought 9/11 was a movie. They had no idea it was a real event. And now you're saying only 14 states? I mean, what the hell are they teaching then?
Look it up. It's only 14 states in the country that teach have an actual curriculum. They might talk about it a little bit, but actually what we were taught about Pearl Harbor, Iwo Jima, just everything, it's not being taught the way it used to be. So I would imagine that has a lot to do with politics, and people have agendas on where this country wants to move toward. But, I keep saying thousands of Americans have died for our freedoms, and countless lives have been lost and people have been bled. And we got to keep that America that we love protected and here for future generations so they can enjoy it. Because if not, like you said, we're just going to end up repeating things, and it's going to be not a good show for everybody.
Right. Oh, man. That makes me more proud than ever that I brought you on the show here, because it's like mine's here. I try to stay apolitical. Sometimes it's a little tough. But
And I tell people, listen, you can be a liberal, you can be a conservative. If you treat me with respect, I treat you with respect. And I have no problem debating with people and talking about people. I think it's just people get hot-headed and they can't talk about things, especially when you hit them with facts. They just can't take it. And listen, like I said, both sides are imperfect. But right now you have one side that's really just way out there. And people need to rein those things in. And like I said, I think I have no problem with a president, a Republican, independent, a Democratic. All I want is someone that loves our country, enforces the laws, keeps us safe, and in the forefront keeps freedom alive and well.
There you go. Well said. Well said. Did you always plan to join the Navy, or is that you just graduated high school and thought, I'll try this out?
Well, as I grew up, like I mentioned before, I was very influenced by the war movies, the courage of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, from Emergency to Adam 12 to all the movies I've seen, Midway. And during my high school years, I was playing soccer at Hackensack High School. I was planning on which college I was going to go to. But I just had a calling about giving back to this nation. It had given my family so much good. My parents worked hard. They bought their first house in Hackensack when I was in fourth grade. And my dad didn't want me to go to the military. He's like, listen, I'll buy you a car and for you to stay home. And I said, no, Dad, I want to serve. I want to give back to this nation. And I ended up joining the U.S. Navy, did my 6 months boot camp in Great Lakes during the wintertime, which really was not great. But it was good because I got to see Chicago. And then next thing you know, I remember getting my orders, and I was boot camp there. And I'm like, what's the triplet? What's an LPH? I don't know what that is, which means landing pad helicopter. And one of my company commanders said, Jimeno, you're going to the Gator Navy. I had no idea what that was. But
the what? What do you call it?
The Gator Navy.
Okay.
And I didn't know what it was, but it turned out to be probably one of the highlights of my life. I ended up being stationed in San Diego on 32nd Street. And it's a helicopter that, if anybody remembers, and for those young people, if you know who Clint Eastwood is, he made a movie called Heartbreak Ridge. You'll see that particular ship is where the Marines fly off in that movie. So we carried Marines with helicopters. So we are an amphibious force. And for me, it was great because you get along so well with Marines. And so it was the best of both worlds. You had the Navy, you had the Corps. And we always got to go into port because the Marines would need time to train or whatever. So it was great because I got to see 11 different countries throughout my 4 years. And I learned a lot. I grew up a lot. And I think one of the important lessons I learned is that people are people no matter where they're from in the world. And what I learned was people really admired America. And every time we came on the Coronado Bridge coming back from overseas or deployment, you understood why this country was so special. And that's when I talked to before, when I say people here in this generation live in bubbles that really don't understand their freedoms. When you go to a third world nation and you see that they don't have the rights or the opportunities that we have here, you understand why so many people want to come here. I mean, Tony Blair said it best, the former prime minister of Britain. He said, any country more people are trying to get into than out is a special country. And I don't need to educate anybody, because if you've noticed the news for the last several years, how many people are trying to get in here, have gotten in here, unfortunately, illegally. It's put a strain on us. And you realize that people want to come to the United States because it's a special place. And that's something I learned and I really cherished. So I did my 4 years in the military. I gave back to my country. And then after that, I decided, again, since a child, I wanted to be a police officer. I felt that police officers are people who give back to the community, protect the community. And I was a Buffy guy. I love being, in the action, and sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for because you get it.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later. But, so that was basically my military career. Was awesome. I got to see Hong Kong before I went back to Chinese rule. So that's a perfect example. I wish I could take what I've seen and learned in the military and just pass it on to every young person today so they can say, hey, you know what? The world is a great place. And I tell everybody, I don't care where you're from in the world, whatever country you're from, you should be proud of that country. You should be proud of your nation. But you also want to be someone who understands that there is a great place in this country, in this world, and it's called America. We are the shining light, and we have opportunities here. And we just want people that come here that are going to work hard like my parents did. And you remember in the 70s, the 80s, people were coming here. They came here with trades. They came here with skills. And it was an endless place for you to make a life for your family. And that's what my family did. So in high school is where I decided I wanted to join the military. And I was blessed to have that path, that ship, those experiences. And it's a big part of who I am.
It's a similar story with me. I was born in the U.S. I was spoiled. I didn't appreciate what I had until we went to Colombia for 3 years. And as beautiful as Colombia is, I mean, it was still somewhat considered a third world country, not like some of the places you've seen. But, I mean, just resources, the people, the only Colombians I ever met were the ones I'd put in jail in Miami for drug trafficking. And as wrong as this is, I stereotyped the whole country before I got there, was pleasantly surprised at how receiving the people were. If you went in and tried to get along with them, they would bend over backwards. I mean, you hear my country accent. When I speak Spanish, it's hola, y'all. And they're working with me. You got to be willing to laugh at yourself, but as long as you try, they were very accepting.
Yes.
Well, then you come back, and for me, what working in Colombia did was make me appreciate living in the United States, because I had an offer later in my career to go back and be the big boss down there. But I was very happy living in the U.S., so it's encouraging to hear you say the same thing.
Yeah, and I think people just have to understand that if you're blessed and life is good for you, enjoy it. But other people don't have it that good. I mean, there's millions upon millions of people who are struggling every single day. And even some of our poorest people here have it better than other people in Korea. I mean, just look at North Korea. They live in communism.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take the time to really look around and see where your position is. If you have it good, just enjoy it and maybe be able to help other people if you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. So you come back from the Navy. Did you ever think about staying longer, making a life career out of it? Or
I did. I was close to actually re-upping because I was going to, there were some orders there for Puerto Rico to go down on the gunboats. I was a gunner's mate. So, but then I decided, no, I'm going to come home. I wanted to, actually, my goal was to come back to New Jersey, go to school, get my degree, and go back to San Diego to be a police officer in San Diego. I really enjoyed San Diego. I enjoyed the weather. I enjoyed everything about San Diego. They had a great police department. Came home, started college. During my college time, I met my wife, Allison, and that really hooked me on staying here. And then it started the quest of becoming a police officer here in the Northeast, which is very sought after, very good pay. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to become a police officer. It took me 6 years. And a lot of that I was taking tests. But while I was trying to become a police officer, me and my wife, Allison, got married. I was going up the ranks in the private security sector, where I started off as just catching shoplifters and then actually ended up going up into their corporate levels. Mm-hmm. And finally, it took me 6 years, but after a test, I took the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey's test, and I got on. And for those that don't know who the Port Authority Police is, the Port Authority Police is the major police department in New York and New Jersey that protects and serves all the major transportation facilities. So we have the three major airports, the bridges, the tunnels, the PATH train, the World Trade Center, the bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan, which is the largest in the country and actually, believe it or not, the busiest in the world. Port Newark, like I said, the tunnels, and of course the World Trade Center, like I mentioned. So it was a great opportunity, and I was blessed to get on that department, and ended up going in August 2000 to the academy. Our academy is 6 months long because we're not only trained as law enforcement officers, mm-hmm. we're the first responders at the airport. So if some plane goes down, God forbid, or anything happens at our facilities, we're trained also in firefighting as well as medical. So it was a long academy, and we graduated, about 78 of us, 77 of us graduated January 19th, 2001 at the World Trade Center at the Marriott. So it was a really, really big deal. And I'll be honest with you, I loved every minute of it. I was assigned to the bus terminal with about 50 of my fellow classmates. And the bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan is two large buildings from 40th to 42nd Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. And it's a world within itself.
Yeah.
But it was a great time for me because, again, being someone who's very active, wanted to work, I had everything in there. We unfortunately had shootings, we had stabbings, we had medical conditions, but at the same time, we had good things. We were able to find a lot of lost kids, runaway kids. We were able to prevent a lot of crime. And in those 9 months leading up to the attacks, I got to really do what I wanted to do since I was a child, and that's be a cop. When I remember 6 weeks before the attack, I felt like we really attained the American dream. Me and my wife, Allison, had bought our first home in Clifton, New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes outside New York City. And it was awesome. I mean, we bought our home, we moved in, had a beautiful wife, had a beautiful little girl at that time, Bianca, who was 4, and my wife was now pregnant. And I was living the American dream, I'll be honest with you. I loved it. And not one day did I go to work and say, oh, I hate going to work. For me, it was never work. It was a job, a lifetime. Every day, I was just getting up and going to work, having a great time.
How does the World Trade Center fall under the Port Authority Police?
Well, the World Trade Center was built and operated by the Port Authority, and anything that's Port Authority facility is protected and served by the Port Authority Police. So at the time, and I could be off on this number, I want to say it was about 1,200 of us. I think now we're over about 2,000 because they see the necessity to have more officers. But at the time, we were the 26th largest police department. I believe we still are the 26th largest police department in the country. And we have everything. We have patrol, we have detectives, we have K-9, we have ESU or SWAT officers. We have counterterrorism units, as well as a CVI for the trucks and the transportation. So we have a vast opportunity within the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey. And I was proud because I was a Jersey guy, but I was working in New York. And it's a funny story because sometimes you'd hear stories of the criminals that would run through the Lincoln Tunnel from the New York side to the Jersey side, and they get grabbed, and they're like, well, wait a second, you're out of your jurisdiction. And I'm like, look at the patch. We're police officers in both the state of New York and New Jersey. But it's a great job. I'm actually going to speak to the new academy here tomorrow, believe it or not. I think it's the 123rd now. I was the 100th, the centennial. So nice. It's a great department. I'm very proud of the men and women who served there. I'm very proud to see so many young men and women coming into it today, and that I'm still a part of it by being able to go back and talk to them about survival, about being able to also, which we'll talk about, is more importantly, is if you're unfortunately in a situation that not every officer or first responder does through their career, and they're lucky if they don't, but if they're ever in a tragedy, how do you recover from that? Especially when your job is over. How do you pick up the pieces and move forward? And that's something that I had to learn and fight through to get to what I call happiness. So I'm blessed to still be part of the job and be able to influence young men and women who want to wear the shield.
Excellent. You mentioned CVI. What is that?
So that's our unit that takes care of, they inspect all the trucks, anything with transportation. So they're checking trucks for weights and stuff like that. And sometimes when you're doing that job, it leads you to drug seizures, So that's a special unit there that does all the motorized stuff like that.
Wow. I didn't realize they had all those different sections within Port Authority Police. Yeah,
we're a large department. Like I said, people don't realize that. But one time we have an aviation unit. We did bring back the motorcycle unit too. That kind of went away for a little bit, but now they're back. And we have a great pipes and band, drums and pipes that are and honestly world renowned. Get to travel a lot of places. Great pipe and band we have.
Nice. I love the Irish, Murphy.
We're all Irish. Once you put on the shield, they're all Irish.
That's it, bro. There's guys that think like that too. We've got a DEA badge somebody created online that the center is a shamrock. So every St. Patty's Day, you got that badge out.
Absolutely.
Your academy, was it a live-in academy or did you go home at nighttime?
So unfortunately for my academy, we were living down at Seagirt, New Jersey, where the New Jersey State Police train. And I got on when I was 33. So for me, it wasn't a big deal. The only thing that really stunk was that I was married. I had a baby at home, and I was away Monday to Friday. I'd come home on the weekends. But I also understood for me, it was my meal ticket. And, we would train all day, and in the evenings, there was nothing to do. So it kind of stunk on that end. But one thing that me and a couple of other guys that were older, and I'll talk about two of my partners that unfortunately passed on that, we understood too, this is a great opportunity for us, for our families. I never became a cop for financial reasons. I was very fortunate to get on a police force that does offer you great financial security for your family, great benefits. So for me, it was like, when everybody would complain, they usually complain silly things, and especially the young guys, it's like, shut up and just do your training. And when we're done, we're going to have a good life. And that's what you expected. Unfortunately, mine, as well as many other of my fellow officers, took a twist, and some for the ultimate sacrifice of giving their lives and serving, protecting the people of New York and New Jersey. But it was a great academy. We lived there. And what was great about it was just camaraderie. You made good friends with people, and that's what got you through it. Because unfortunately, our class, the 100th, had a lot, like a black cloud over it. We had, unfortunately, a lot of people lose loved ones while we're in the academy, which made it tough because, again, you couldn't go home. Today, I want to say since after 9/11, the academies were basically they could go home. So when I say that sucked, it sucked for us because we would have loved to have been able to go home. But that was just the time period, and we had to get through it, which we did.
Yeah. So you come out of the academy now, and what's your first assignment?
Was the bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan.
Okay.
Right there in Midtown. Like I said, it was just a great place. I was working 7 to 2s. I was steady days. We would work a 4 and 2 schedule. And it was great because I'd go to work early, do my tour, and I'd actually be home in time to pick up my daughter from my parents' house or my in-laws' house at the time, Pat and Paul, Allison's parents, and spend the rest of the day with my daughter. So it worked out really well.
Nice. So let's just move right on down to 9/11. Now, how much time do you have on the job now?
9 months.
Does that include your academy time?
No. It was more with academy time. At that point, academy time, we would have already had a year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, technically, we would have been on probation a year after we get to our job,
graduate,
our commands. But yeah, so we went in August of 2000, and of course 9/11 happened September 11th, 2001. So like I said, I count the time from the bus terminal 9 months leading up to the attacks. But September 11th was no different day than any other day. I got up in the morning, got ready for work, went into my bedroom, kissed Allison goodbye, kissed her belly because now she was 7 months pregnant with our second little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Went into the other room, kissed Bianca, my 4-year-old, goodbye. And I literally skipped down the stairs, jumped in my truck, went to Midtown Manhattan, went downstairs. And what I tell everybody, and I say this to the kids especially, is you never outgrow high school. I don't care. I've been able to meet from presidents on down. And if you spend enough time with anybody, something's going to happen that you're just like, this is like high school crap. But you'd go downstairs, and here we are, grown men with shields, guns, and the law, and guys are goofing off in the locker room, and it was just an enjoyable place. I put on our uniforms, went upstairs to what's called roll call, where we're giving out our assignments, and it was a normal day, beautiful day, like people that have heard about 9/11 or learning about 9/11 will learn that there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was just a beautiful day in New York. We went upstairs, we were given our assignments. My assignment was post 3-5, which was the corner of 42nd and 8th Avenue, so I had the front of the building and the second building, and I was literally standing under an awning. There was an awning that came above me. Behind me was 8th Avenue, and then you had to my right 42nd, 8th Avenue. And so what we have in the mornings and in the afternoons at the bus terminal is what we call the rush. The rush is in the morning is thousands of people coming in from Connecticut, New Jersey, upstate New York, buses coming in from different parts of the country. It's just a really very chaotic, a lot of people. And our jobs are to be situated throughout the buildings in different posts to make sure that, of course, everybody's safe, make sure we can give people advice, make sure we stop any crime, just doing our jobs. And that morning was no different. I was standing there. I was leaning up against a taxi pole, looking toward the doorways where everybody's coming out of the building so I can keep an eye on everything. I happened to look to my right, and when that awning ended, you'd be outside. You could see the sky. Mm-hmm. And Sergeant Ross and two fellow officers, Pat McNerney and Eric Sanchez standing there with him. And I just happened to look over, and I see Sergeant Ross like following something with his hand. And I'm like, I couldn't hear because there's a lot of traffic. But what I did see was, for those who have never been to New York City, an intersection in New York City is pretty large.
Mm-hmm.
That whole intersection went dark for a second. I didn't really know what that was. I didn't pay attention. I just went back to doing my job. A few minutes later, our radios crackled, and they said, all units, 840 back to the police desk, which means everybody come back. So I started walking across 41st Street over toward the other building, toward 40th, and I hooked up with my fellow officer, Dominic Pizzullo. Dominic graduated with me. He was 35. He had just made the cutoff. He, unlike me, came to the Port Authority not for the dream of being a police officer. He was actually a high school teacher in the Bronx. He came over for the finances of the job. Those 9 months leading up to September 11th, Dominic understood and learned what it meant to be part of the Thin Blue Line. And he was a great cop, really was. But he was a very loved person. I mean, his students from the Bronx High School where he taught, he would tell me they would come back by his home at night and say, Mr. Pizzullo, can you come back and teach us, And he's like, no, I have a new career. But we started walking back, and I go by Will, but I always let him call me Willie because he helped me out when I had my move in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a great guy. And he's like, Willie, something bad must have happened for them to call us all back. So I'm like, yeah. So now we're walking from 8th Avenue through the building toward 9th Avenue where our police desk was. So we got down there and we came around the corner. And one of the things I learned when I was in the military was that a senior sailor told me, he goes, if we're ever in a bad situation, a life and death situation, always follow somebody in to a bad situation that knows what they're doing, because your chances of coming out of there are at a greater percentage. And that's something I really teach people and try and instill in people is, as you grow, no matter what you do in life, educate yourself. As you rise in the ranks or you become a higher boss, learn your positions, because people are going to lean on you as a leader and you need to lead them. And when it comes to military, law enforcement, firefighting, EMTs, they're going to be people who are under you, who are looking to you for leadership. And that leadership decision you make could save someone's life. And
Absolutely.
that stuck with me. And as I came around the corner, I looked up to the police desk that sits higher, because if you walk in, you can't get to our cops up there. We have a station house officer who addresses anybody who comes in, but the police desk sits high. And I remember seeing our lieutenants or sergeants, but one particular sergeant, John McLaughlin, is someone who I admired. He was very quiet, but very respectful. And he treated you like an adult, and had been to several dicey situations with him, and he was always on point, knew what he was talking about. Later, I learned out, because he's a very quiet person, that he was part of our SWAT team, ESU. And I could see concern in his face, and that caught my attention. So I kept walking, and we went back into what's called our reserve room, and that's where our break room is. And we came around the corner, and all I see on a TV set, we had a big TV set, and New York One, which is a news station, was on. And all you see is the Trade Center with Tower One with a big black gaping hole in it and smoke coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that distinguishes the Port Authority Police from our counterparts at the NYPD and our counterparts on the Jersey side, because we have a lot of municipalities, we have the New Jersey State Police, is that we do the same job as every other police department does. What sets us apart is all our facilities are target-rich environments. So we were hit in 1993. We were taught that in academy, and they said, guys, what you guys have to deal with are terrorists. If you think about it, if a terrorist is going to come, what do they want to do? They want to kill, maim, injure as many people as they can. And you look at our Port Authority facilities, the airports, the bridges, the tunnels. At any one time, you have a large concentration of people. You look at the George Washington Bridge in the morning with the tons of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we're taught these lessons in the academy. You taught about, God forbid you're in a shooting, you do this, but you never expect it to happen. Then it happens. Then it's reality. And that's how I felt. It was like, oh my God, this is really happening. What they said in the academy is happening. So at that point, I turned around, and we had payphones back then. So I grabbed the payphone and I got through to my wife, Allison, which was a miracle because the phone lines were really tied up. I got through to her because usually if there was a shooting or something happening at the bus terminal, I would call her, let her know I was okay if I was there. Mm-hmm. And I did. I got through to her. And right away, her thing was, hey, what's going on? Do you know about such and such and such and such person? We had two people that were mutual friends that worked at the World Trade Center. I said, I don't know. All I know is a plane has flown into the Trade Center. I don't have any information on that. And that's where Inspector Fields, who was our commanding officer, came in the back with a couple sergeants and lieutenants and said, listen up, we're going to call your name. We've commandeered a bus on 9th Avenue. When we call your name, get on the bus. We're heading down there because, again, we have a precinct down there. We have a command there. So our cops are the first ones there. So at that point, myself, Dominic Pizzulo, another senior officer, Mikey Robles, who we didn't even wait for our names to get called. We just started going and walking down into the escalator out to 9th Avenue and jump on this bus. About 20 of us get on there. Sergeant McLaughlin gets into a police Suburban next to us with the inspector and Sergeant Feely. And before you know it, we're heading down to the World Trade Center. And again, I always say you still don't know about Grove High School. We're on the bus. Nobody really knows what's going on. It's chaotic. Now, mind you, back then, we weren't allowed to carry our cell phones. So I happened that day to leave my cell phone in my locker. And not everybody listens to that. A couple of guys had their cell phones on. But as we're going down there, their cell phones weren't working. Cell phone service was dead. We're kind of arguing a little bit about it, some people on the bus. Like, that can't be a major airliner, because even in 2001, the technology was still far in advance where an airliner was just not going to slam into a building like that. Mm-hmm. So everybody was going back and forth, and we were really flying down there. We cut through the village, and we were on, one of the streets heading down there. It was about 2 city blocks back when everybody just went silent. We looked to our right, and we saw a person in the middle of the street, profusely bleeding. An FDNY ambulance, what we call a bus, was working on him. And that's when everybody was like, wow, this is serious. Now, this is 2 city blocks back. We went one more block up, and we stopped in front of a block from Vesey Street. So for those that don't know the World Trade Center, the West Side Highway runs one side, Liberty Street on the other side, Church Street, and then Vesey Street. So we were looking at Vesey Street, and we get off the bus about a block away. I got to tell you, I never thought I'd see what I saw that day, which was war. War had come to American soil. I stepped off the bus. There was debris everywhere. From where we were to Vesey Street was nothing but destruction. And I remember just looking up and seeing this big black gaping hole. And then I looked at Tower 2, and I saw the corner of it on fire. Now, in my mind, I felt like, okay, the first plane hit. At this point, I only think it's one plane. The plane hit, blew up, and something deflected and caught the corner of 2 on fire. What we didn't know was when we were en route, in transit from Midtown Manhattan to downtown, the second plane hit. So we couldn't see the big gaping hole on 2 on the other side. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, one tower's hit. The other ones took a debris, but now what do we do? And I remember just standing there thinking, man, how small I felt, because especially as men, right? We're tough. Here we are with our uniforms on, our shields on, our gun belts, but I felt this big because you realize that we are small individuals in this big world. And what makes us strong is when we come together. But at that point, I'm standing there, and that's when one of our senior officers who had been in the 93 bombing says, look up, they're jumping. And that's when we unfortunately see people jumping from that black hole, and they were jumping by themselves. They were jumping holding hands, and they would fall, and then it would disappear behind Building 6. And I just remember thinking to myself, we got to get up there. We got to be able to break a wall for them to see our uniform and say, let's go, let's get you home. And I'm standing there, and that's when Sergeant McLaughlin had run through that debris field from Vesey Street coming toward us. He had parked up the police Suburban up on Church and Vesey Street and came running back toward us. And he actually said, hey, guys, I need volunteers. I need guys that know how to use Scott air packs. Again, Port Authority police officers are not only trained in law enforcement, but we're also trained in firefighting. So I remember at that point, just 3 of us volunteered. I can't tell you who volunteered first, but Dominic Pizzulo, myself, and another fellow officer, Antonio Rodriguez. Antonio Rodriguez had 4 years on the NYPD, but came over the Port Authority, again, for the finances. But he was a great cop. Again, he was 35, so we're kind of like the old guys in the academy. Antonio had just come back from Portugal on a vacation. It was his first day back, his first day tour. And Antonio was just a great guy. He was one that always would look out for everybody, like, hey, we're going to be on our pins on our legs. Most of the time as Port Authority cops, make sure you got a bottle of water thrown in the back pocket, have an extra handcuff key. He just, would always take the time to, educate the rookies. Even though he was considered rookie as a Port Authority officer, he already had 4 years on the job. So, because he was New York City, I believe, transit. But at that point, the 3 of us volunteered, and I remember we started following the sergeant, and I remember thinking, man, I'm scared. I'm really scared because as we're running, all I see is a debris field. I see body parts. I see pieces of the plane, and here's all our guys with FDNY standing behind us. They're all staging. They're all trying to figure out what we're going to do. And Sergeant Glock said, let's go. So we start running. We get right next to the building 5, and there's an entrance. Sergeant McLaughlin said, Jimeno, take our hats, our PR24s, which is the clubs we carried at the time, our memo books, which we carry like the city guys, go up to the Suburban, throw our equipment in there, come back and meet us in an E-room. E-rooms are emergency rooms that are set up throughout the World Trade Center for first responders to get all the gear they need, whether it's helmets, bunker coats, Scott air packs, axes, whatever we need. So I said, okay. So they went in. I ran up to the corner of Church and Vesey. The police Suburban at that point I realized had been hit by a big piece of concrete. That's when I realized, hey, dummy, there's actually stuff falling. Because, I think people can understand if you've ever been in an emergency or something. Things are chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Things sometimes don't seem real. And it takes you a second to kind of like focus. And that's when I focused, like, man, there's concrete falling from above. Be careful. So I threw the stuff in the police Suburban. And when I looked down Church Street, I saw thousands of people just being herd out like cattle. I mean, they're running. Again, not knowing Tower 2 had been hit. So I thought that was wild, and I ran back, got into the building with the guys, and we hit the first emergency, the E-room. There wasn't – Antonio Rodriguez looked like a firefighter. He put his bunker coat on, put a helmet on, Scott air pack. There was no bunker coats for me and Dominic, so we just threw our helmets on, our Scott air packs, and we looked like firefighters with guns on our side. We checked each other, and one thing we said to each other is, no matter what happens, we don't leave each other. Mm-hmm. And for those that were never in the World Trade Center was 2 large buildings, right, 110 stories each. They were in a 16-acre complex connected underneath by what we call the concourse. The concourse level is where you have your mall. It's a mall. You have stores. You have businesses. And they had escalators that would go down to the PATH train and to the subways. So it was a very popular place. And when I got in there, at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. We're going to the police desk. So we got on an elevator. And I remember kind of chuckling, thinking to myself, it's a major fire going on. I don't think we're supposed to be in an elevator. But I trusted Sergeant McLaughlin. Mm-hmm. So we get to the police desk, which oddly, I didn't know for years. If you watch the French documentary where they start off with the firefighters and they actually see the plane hit the World Trade Center, you will see them break off from the FDNY and actually hook up with, I believe, Detective Wheeler from the Port Authority Police. And they are actually at the police desk with us. You don't see me or the guys, but you see Sergeant McLaughlin. And we're actually at that point being told by Sergeant McLaughlin, let's get this mail canvas cart. Let's get more equipment in there and whatever we can get before we start heading up. So that's what we did. At that point, we leave the police desk. I'm actually pushing the cart, get back on the elevator, get up to the concourse level, came out. And I remember there was like water on the ground. There was about seemed like 2 inches of water on the ground. We're coming around the escalators, going down the path, and we're coming around. And as I'm pushing the cart, I remember one thing that people always ask me, what's the one thing you saw the most in the building September 11th? And I tell people it's love. It's love. There was a steady flow of people coming from Tower 1 in a single file line. And mind you, there are people who are dead. There are people who are injured. And these civilians are helping each other. And I remember seeing a black gentleman with a white gentleman carrying this blonde woman who had a severe cut. And they're carrying her in a single file line, and they're heading toward this FBI agent who's directing them on where to go. And I thought to myself, man, if these people can be this brave, us in uniform, we need to be 3 notches above them because they're relying on us. Mm-hmm. At that point, we hit a crossroads. We could have went right when we got to there, could have went right and straight to Tower 1 or went down to our left to Tower 2. We actually bumped into another crew of Port Authority police officers, about 4 or 5 of them too. And the guy pushing their cart was one of our classmates, Warren Stewart. Stewart was a 4-year NYPD detective. Great guy, and Stewart's wife was pregnant while we're in the academy and gave birth to Amanda, the little girl. And I remember Stewart always had a smile on his face. He was a great guy. And that was one of the lights, one of the happy points in the academy was seeing Amanda be born, because he would walk around with the picture and show everybody. And that was a great time. But Stewie was assigned to the PATH train, which is the Port Authority Trans-Hudson, one of our other commands that sat underneath the World Trade Center. So at that point, their team and our team sergeants started talking, and we said to Stewie, hey, man, what's going on? He's like, this is crazy. We kind of chit-chat a little bit. Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. We're pushing off. They're pushing off. And I remember just reaching out and fist pumping. Stewie says, stay safe. That's the last time I would see him. Unfortunately, that crew of Port Authority police officers were never recovered. They were just basically pulverized. But years later, I got to meet Amanda. And I got to say that she's a beautiful young lady and is a great representative of her father. But at that point, we continued on. Now we're going to Tower 2. At that point, we meet up with another fellow officer, Christopher Amoroso. There's a famous picture of Christopher Amoroso. He's one of our Port Authority officers who's actually saving a woman, and you'll see him with Nike gloves. It's a Daily News picture that's out there. He was a great cop. I mean, he embodies the saying, "I'll go through a door with you." You know, that means that no matter what's on that side of that door, I trust you with my life. That's the kind of cop that Christopher Amoroso was. He had already saved several people before coming back into the building, seeing us, because he had been recently transferred from the bus terminal to the World Trade Center. So we worked with him. He was actually one of my OJT officers. When we came up to us, he was injured already. He had taken a hit over his eye, and we're like, Chris, are you okay? He's like, don't worry about me. We got to get people out. And that's the kind of American, the kind of cop, the kind of first responder that was there on September 11th. Mm-hmm. They didn't care about themselves. We wanted to get people out. At that point, we went to Tower 2. Sergeant Glock said, Jimeno, stay here with the cart. The rest of you guys come downstairs. We're going to hit another E-room to get more equipment. So I'm standing there by myself. I was by a Ben and Jerry ice cream shop, and I can actually look into the lobby of 2, because to get to either Tower 1 or Tower 2 are big glass revolving doors and glass windows you can look into the lobby. And of course, the lobbies were huge. And I'm looking, and that fear came over me again, because now I see people who are dead. I see people injured. I could see our cops shooting the windows out on the other side of the lobby toward Liberty Street to let people get out more. But then, unfortunately, I saw concrete falling. I also saw human bodies, and that sound was distinctive of a piece of concrete and a human being. And I kept hearing a lot of that human being, and that was tough, because I knew we were losing people. But that's when, out of nowhere, I see a cop coming up to me, short, African-American, bald, and it was Bruce Reynolds. He was one of our cops from the George Washington Bridge, which was one of our senior commands. I mean, you had to have like 15 years on to get up there. The only reason I knew Bruce was because, again, growing up in Hackensack, New Jersey, sits in the county of Bergen. We have the Bergen County record. The George Washington Bridge sits on Fort Lee toward Jackson Heights, New York, toward the Bronx. So our cops, unfortunately, have people who take their lives off our bridges. And I'd seen a couple articles where Port Authority cops saved people from jumping, and Bruce was one of those guys. So I kind of knew who he was just because of the paper. Mm-hmm. He walks up to me. He was sweating. He had a Scott Air Pack on. And he says, hey, Reynolds, GWB. I said, Jimeno, BT, bus terminal. And we talked for a little bit. I needed that up. Here I'm 33 years old in the Navy, but I'm scared. But
it's not a natural event.
Yeah, but where does courage come from? It comes from overcoming your fears. And Bruce Reynolds, I later found out, shouldn't have even been in the building. So he had a lung condition from some other job that he did in the past. But here he is, putting his life on the line, inspiring me, and says, you know what, kid, it's going to be a long day, but we're going to get a lot of people out of here. Mm. And I needed that at that point. And at that point, we chit-chat a little bit. That's when the rest of the team started coming up. Bruce started walking away. And that's the last time I would see Bruce Reynolds. And the funny thing, going back to the Irish thing, is Bruce loved Ireland. He married an Irish woman. He was the only police officer back in the day that would walk at the St. Paddy's Day parade, and he would paint his black bald head green. Truly wanted to be an Irishman. Grew up in the Bronx, lived out in the country of New Jersey, drove 90 miles every day to go to work. But that's the last time I seen him. I told them where I'd seen him last. They found him the following February at the command center of Tower 2 with I think 20, 30 other people. But that's the kind of, again, an American Port Authority police officer who was in the buildings that day. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we decided we're going to start going back to Tower 1.
And then, so now it's you and the Sarge, Ambroso, Dominic.
Yes, there's 5 of us now, led by Sergeant McLaughlin, Christopher Amoroso, Dominic Pizzulo, Antonio Rodriguez, and myself. Okay. So there's 5 of us.
And so how high are you guys going to go? The elevators aren't working at this point, right?
No, so at that point, we have to leave Tower 2. So I start pushing the cart again. And at that point, Antonio Rodriguez, which I credit primarily for the beginning of my survival, says to me, hey, you've been pushing from the police desk here. Let me take over, because if you're tired, you're not going to be any good wherever we're going. Again, we don't know where we're going. We're just following Sergeant McLean. At that point, he gets behind the cart. So he's at the 6 o'clock of the cart. We're going to head up this hallway, which is pretty large. Antonio Rodriguez 9 o'clock position. Sergeant McLaughlin is at the 11 o'clock position in front of the cart. I am directly in front of the cart at noon, and Dominic is at the 1, 2 o'clock position. We start walking up this hallway. We happen to stop halfway up, and to our right is a passageway to a freight elevator, which turns out to be a miracle. But at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin stops. He's talking to some firefighters, and one EMT, I remember, was with him. And he's telling them, listen, just came up from the B1 level. The elevator shafts look like they're buckling. As we all know, if your base is buckling, the tops is no good. We didn't know that. We didn't know Tower 2 was in distress. The radio goes off. Sergeant McLaughlin's talking to Inspector Fields. He's asking us where the location is. He's talking to him when all of a sudden we hear boom, a humongous boom. I turn around and I look back from where we walked, and I'm now looking into, again, the lobby of 2, and I see a fireball, the size of my house. And I'm standing there holding my helmet. Everything is shaking like an earthquake. And remember, like I said, follow somebody in that knows what they're doing because you're coming out or better. At that split second, all I see is a fireball. I see shaking. I don't see anything else. Sergeant McLaughlin saw, as the building's coming down, if you guys can watch the videos, as the building's coming down, it is pushing debris in 4 directions because it has to come down. Well, he saw the wall of debris coming toward us. In a split second, what does he think? What do they do in the Middle East? They blow something up, let the first responders come in, kill them again. He threw a car bomb. So he says, run toward the freight elevator. We don't know the buildings. I've been there 3 times prior on protest. I don't know the buildings. Sergeant McLaughlin helped set up the security after the 93 bombing. He knew the buildings like the back of his hand. So he said, run toward the freight elevator. What his thought was, if he can get us around that freight elevator, perhaps the elevator shaft beams might deflect the explosion and protect us somehow. So talk about quick thinking. So Dominic starts running. I run behind Dominic. I can look behind me. I can see Sergeant McLaughlin coming. And I could see now the lights flickering. And I see brown stuff, which today I know is the building coming down. That's the first time I said, Will, what did you get yourself into? And I remember seeing Dominic starting to turn to the left. And I thought for a split second I saw light. Now, mind you, we're in between both towers. And I thought, run toward the light, save yourself. But then I remembered we promised each other we wouldn't leave each other. So I followed Dominic, and that's when something big picked me up, threw me on my back. And as police officer, our first line of defense is communication. So I went from my radio lapel, which was on my lapel, and I'm yelling 813, which is our code for everybody come. The shit hit the fan. I need everybody. I'm yelling 813, officer down, 813, officer down. I think I must have said it 4 or 5 times. Something hit my hand. I lost my mic. At that point, I'm holding on my helmet. Something hits me so hard, it rips my helmet off. And I have a chin strap, ripped it off. And I'm just holding on for dear life. And the way I say it, it's like a million freight trains just coming down on us. Getting pelted with concrete, just getting beat up. And then all of a sudden, everything stops. And we're in the pitch black. And it's silent. Just silence. I don't even know if I'm dead or alive. After a little bit, I could see some light coming in from my right side about 30 feet up, 25, 30 feet up. And I just remember looking, and I'm in shock at this point. I can't see that. All I see is gray. And what I see is literally what I know today is a wall fell on me, and it went from under my armpit all the way down my left side. My right leg was up in a 90-degree angle, but still buried under concrete by my feet, and only a small area to my right, maybe, I don't even know, maybe 3 feet, 4 feet, small area. When I look, I can see Dominic Pizzullo is now buried to my left side in a push-up position down. So that wall hit me and compacted him in debris. Then I hear Sergeant McLaughlin beyond my feet, and he says, sound off. So at that point, I said, Jimeno. Dominic said, Pizzullo, and we didn't hear Rodriguez or Amoroso. For the next 2 minutes, I just kept yelling, Chris, A-Rod, which was Antonio's nickname, Antonio Rodriguez, we call A-Rod. And after 2 minutes, Dominic said, Willie, they're in a better place. And that's when we realized we just lost 2 of our fellow officers, 2 brothers, 2 husbands, 2 sons, 2 Americans. And that was difficult. Sergeant McLaughlin in the initial collapse, I was the one injured in the initial collapse. Dominic was fine, but compacted in debris. Sergeant McLaughlin is stuck in the first collapse in a fetal position. He can't move anything but his right arm. His helmet is stuck. He can't move. So at that point, he says, well, try to free yourselves, work on that. And Dominic did. Dominic had to shimmy out of his Scott Air Pack. He literally had to crawl over my face because it was only about maybe 18 inches above me, and it was all concrete, and he had to literally crawl over my face. He gets over to my right, and he looks up, and he sees the hole. And human beings, he's just like, hey, Sarge, I can go up and get help. Sergeant McLaughlin said, no, if you leave us, you'll never find us, because he thought it's a debris field out there.
Mm-hmm.
You get Jimeno out, and then you and Jimeno get me out. He never knew how badly I was injured. So it took a little bit, and we talked about it, to be honest with you. And Dominic did the right thing. He said, let me try to get you out. There was a piece of rebar that was bent on my right side with a piece of concrete at the end. And he was trying to get that off, and it would whip back and hit me. And it went on for a little bit. And believe it or not, we kind of chuckled. And I said, bro, you're kicking my ass. He's like, I'm sorry, bro, I'm trying. But then he stopped and he sat down. He kind of sat back and he said, I can't get you out, really. And that's when that fear came over again. Like, well, we're in trouble here. Like, he can't get me out. That's when we heard another humongous boom. And that's when Dominic kind of like half-assed stood up. And that's when everything started happening again. And at this point, I figured we're going to die. It's over, because this is happening again. Same sound, getting hit. What I did at that point is something I've always done to my wife and my daughters, is in sign language say, I love you. So I took my hands and I crossed them over my chest, because I figured I'm going to die. And if they find me and they find me like this, I hope they tell my wife that's how we found them, because she would then know, hey, he was thinking of us. Because up to that point, it was always the job, the civilians, my teammates. And at the very end, I thought I was going to die. That's when I thought of my family, because as first responders, military, we have a job to do, and that's what we have to focus on. But unfortunately, at that point, I heard Sergeant McLaughlin now start yelling really, really loud, because he's actually now being compacted to where his service weapon is actually being pushed into his body. That's how much pressure. His pelvis is breaking. I mean, it's bad. And unfortunately, at that point, Dominic gets hit with something that came into the hole and sat down like a rag doll. And again, it seemed like it was happening forever. A lot of pain, a lot of yelling. And when everything's done, I'm yelling, Sergeant McLaughlin's yelling, but I look over and Dominic's profusely bleeding out of his mouth. You know, I'm like, Dom, hold on. He's like, Willie, I'm dying. He said to the sergeant, which was really weird, he's like, can I have a 3-8, which means break? And Sergeant McLaughlin actually stopped his yelling and said, yeah, you can have a 3-8. And I said, Dominic, please hold on. He goes, Willie, I'm dying. Don't forget that I died trying to save you guys. I said, Dominic, I won't let anybody forget that. In his last moments, he was still thinking about the team. He was able to get his sidearm out, and he pointed the gun up into that hole where light was coming. He fired one round, and that's when he slumped over. And now at this point, he's only like a couple feet from me. And I had to watch my friend die, my partner, a fellow cop. And that was tough. I was kind of off the hook, hysterical, and Sergeant McLaughlin, through his pain, says, you need to calm down. You know, and at that point I said, Sarge, what do we do now? And he goes, Jimeno, there's no training for this. You know, we all train, whether you're federal, local, military, we're trained. But there are certain situations in this world that are so unmanageable that I don't care if you're a Navy SEAL, you're a SWAT guy, or you're a patrol cop, a firefighter, EMT. There are things that are going to happen that are just undescribable, unbelievable, that we never thought would happen. And this was happening. September 11th, I can think anybody can agree, was something that was not, that was unbelievable. Nobody ever trained for such an event. Nobody was taught how to survive such an event. And Sergeant McLaughlin said, if they don't find us by the morning, we're going to die from compartment syndrome, because we're being crushed. He explained that what that was. And that was harsh. That was tough, because I had asked him, Sarge, what do you do now? He goes, this is going to come down strictly to our will to survive. And that's something that everybody has in them. You don't have to be a military person, a cop, firefighter. Everybody within us has that, the will to survive. And that's what we had to rely on. Let me tell you, to make, you know, not to go into too detailed, but the next several hours, a lot of bad things happened down there. Unimaginable. Dominic's gun cooked off, fireballs fell in, and it dragged on into the night. At one point, I just wanted to die. You know, I just wanted to die. This is hours into this. I tell people when I talked about faith, hope, and love, at that point, I wanted to die. We had been crushed, been burnt, been shot at, lost 3 teammates, one who's right there next to me. And I said, God, I just want to die. So I said, God, I'm going to ask you for 2 favors, because I felt everybody was going to go to heaven that day, because these cowards, these terrorists, attacked innocent human beings that were just trying to make a better life for their family. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask you for 2 favors. One is let me see my daughter be born, because I knew how hard this was going to be for my wife. She was going to give birth and I was going to be gone. And I said, let me from heaven see this child be born. And the second one, and you know, I tell people you can laugh. I said, God, when I get to heaven, can I have some water? We were so caked in concrete. I was so thirsty. And I closed my eyes and I tell people, you can call it a dream, a vision, whatever you want. But I said, I close my eyes and what I see is a person walking toward me with a white glowing robe, no face, brown hair, Over his left shoulder in the distance is a tranquil lake with trees around it. Over his right shoulder is a tall endless sea of grass. And I see this person coming to me. Now, I know who it is. For me, it's Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And what does he have in his hand? And you can laugh at this. He's got a bottle of water. I can't tell if it's Poland Spring or what. But I snap out of that dream, that vision, or whatever you want to call it, with a desire to fight.
Yeah.
I have the desire to fight because at that moment, I realize if I give up, I give up on my sergeant because I have a big mouth. I was close to the hole. Nobody could hear him. If I give up, I would have given up on my family. I didn't make it home. If I would have given up, I would have given up on my country.
Mm-hmm.
But most of all, I would have given up on myself. So
Yeah.
at that point, I said to the sergeant, Sarge, we're going to get out of this hellhole or we're going to die trying. And that's what set us off, at least for me, to keep fighting because there were many times even after that where we almost faltered. We kept each other awake. Sergeant McLaughlin said, we got to keep each other awake. If we fall asleep, we'll die. And this horrific scene went on for hours upon hours till 8 o'clock that night. When I hear United States Marine Corps, can anybody hear us? I'm hallucinating.
Let's call it right there because, I mean, we got so much more to cover, but I want everybody to know what happens when we come back. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you. This time has flown by. I feel like I'm stressed out right now. Just by listening to the story, you can picture these things in your head, and it causes stress and anxiety. I'm sure it does with you also. We got a man here who's just only by God's grace is he alive, he and his sergeant, because his companions or his colleagues, 3 of them have died. The fireball he's talking about actually came down and burned them. The rounds cooking off and everybody's weapons. That's how hot this fire is. That you got rounds being shot around you. This is my legs are going crazy under the desk here. It's just what you guys went through is just unbelievable, and we're not even finished yet. So do me a favor, come back tomorrow. We're going to go through the rest of this story, find out what happened. And just when they got out of the towers eventually, that's not the end of the story. This thing is continuing to go and go and go. So thank you so much for continuing to come back to join us here. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, God bless.